A couple of quick things before we go into more detail with just that character panel. Selecting text. So if I'm going to go into this body copy down here, and let's just slide our paragraph and character off to the side for a moment, and we'll group them here. Oops, not wanting to group. There we go. So when I click in a area of text, we call it a body copy with my type tool. If I do a single click, if you can see, I have a flashing insertion point, and so that allows me to place my cursor. If I do a double click, it will select one word. If I do a triple click, it will select one line. If I click in any word in the paragraph 4 times, it selects a paragraph, and so this actually is a paragraph right here. If I select 5 times, it will select my entire story. Okay, so those are some really nice, fast ways that I can select different pieces of my text. If I hold on to my Shift, Control, and use the greater than, less than, greater than increases my font size, less than decreases it. So I'm holding Shift, Control, and then using the greater than and less than keys that are on my keyboard right after my letter N, M, then you have less than and you have greater than. So those are fast ways to do some quick edits. Of course, I always can do my copy, cut, paste. I can remember those shortcut keys, or if you don't remember them, go under the edit menu. We've got cut, we've got copy, and then we also, if we have something in our clipboard, so say we have done a cut or copy, let's just do a copy so you can see it light up. I can paste without formatting. Does exactly what it sounds it's going to do. This is handy if you're taking from a word processing document or from one document to another document and you want to kind of have a new look. You can kind of wipe all of that formatting so it comes in just clean and simple. Okay, let's go back to the character panel here and talk a little bit more about that. So the character panel, basically we have our attributes, right? And so those attributes can be altered, like I said earlier, in my paragraph panel or up here under the control panel where you see my cursor going back and forth. Now if you want to change viewing, I can use some preferences. If you go into edit and go down to the very bottom, preferences, I know it's cutting off. I can choose some font preview type things here. If I go to type, I'm able to play around with my font preview size, so I can either have a small, medium, or large. So that's a preference that maybe in the future as you work more in InDesign you might realize you want that to be a little bit bigger. And that would be this area right here where I'm seeing a preview. Okay, so obviously I can change my character there. Also up here under the control, same thing. So that preferences is affecting the view of that preview. Okay, back into character. So let's talk about leading first. Leading, it's not leading, it's leading is the vertical space between lines of text. And it's measured from baseline to baseline. It's measured in points. It typically is by default 120% of a type size. The easiest to see this actually happening is if I choose a 10 point, you can see that 12 point is where my leading is at. Okay, so it comes from the old printing world where they used to put extra chunks of lead in between lines of text before they put it on the press to print a page. So it's followed through, carried through, and we still call that leading. Baseline, remember, is that individual line, invisible line on which a line of text sits. Baseline is the invisible line on which a line of text sits. So I can alter that. I can have just selected characters and increase or decrease my baseline. You can see moving up, moving down. By default, we're at 0 point. Oops. Let's zoom in. Quick little tidbit there, I guess. You can't use your shortcut keys, Control Spacebar, when you're working inside of the text frames because it thinks it wants you to add spaces. All right, so back to my type tool here. So we're at 0. Of course, a positive increases and a negative will decrease below the baseline. Okay, so that's your baseline. We do have scalings here. Be cautious with these because you can get some really wacky, weird effects. Of course, default is 100, and that's another thing. A lot of these are sticky, meaning that they will remember the last way that you left this box. So if you left it a mess with different scalings, different lettings, different baseline shifts, it may remember that, and the next time you start working with text, it will do those weird things to it. So vertical stretches it, and of course you are taking away from sort of the integrity of this specific typeface. So be cautious with these. You know, they're good for effects, but use sparingly. And I already did show you, we do have a vertical alignment of text. I want to just show you one more time because people tend to forget where this is at. Under Object, and we're looking at the text frame options. And here's where we can align. Okay? All right. So now on to the next couple pieces here. Let's talk about kerning, kind of jumping around on our character. But kerning is basically the ability to increase or decrease space between a pair of characters. I'm actually going to go up here and press return a couple times, which by the way is a hard return. A couple of key examples, I guess, that people often do. So these at larger sizes, now they're at 12, they don't look so bad. If I increase them, usually 24 is about where we start seeing some weird things happening. Let's see if I can just extend this box. I'm going to take my handle here and just spread it down so I can see my next line. All right, there we go. So you're starting to see a little bit of odd spacing, maybe between some of the curved and angled letter forms. So this is sort of, it's an art to see this. It's very subjective in how we say what's right and what's wrong. But if I were to say increase this one to even a higher amount, let's see if we can fit a 48 here. Here you can see that some of these letters feel pretty tight, whereas others feel like there's kind of an awkward little space in between. So what you would typically do, my cursor is right now between the A and the S, I would go into my kerning and I would start decreasing that amount. And the kerning and tracking are all measured on M's. So basically it's 1/1000th of an M, meaning that if my font size is say 6-point font, my M is going to be equal to 6 points. So here I'm in 48 points, so my M is 48 points. So I'm changing this in 1/1000th of that. So it's going to be very, very small. It's not going to move very quickly at all. But you can see I'm using some presets here. It's going 10 at a time actually. And can you see it move closer? I'll overdo it. Now they're overlapping. Okay, so this is a way, again, it's visual. It's what people feel. I don't really want them overlapping, but I do want them to go a little bit closer together so that visually it just feels better. Okay, so look at the relationship of the H and the I, and now look at the S and the H and try to, visually, does that feel better? So that's what kerning is all about. Tracking then, and I'll just select Atlanta here to show you, where kerning is between individual letters, tracking is then for an entire word or sentence or even paragraph. It's more global than kerning. So if I increase this, you can see that with my tracking going up, basically all spaces are being increased. And actually this, when you do this, you can really see that some of these have an awkward spacing in between. You can almost see it better this way. So tracking and kerning measured both by an M. They are 1/1000th of an M. and that unit is determined by the font size. It's a direct relationship to that, and it's very subjective. All right. On to a couple more pieces that we have here. Let's just click the A and show you. We do have some options under our menu, and I know mine is getting cut off a little bit, but we have things here like superscript and subscript. Superscript, of course, reduces and it raises the text above the baseline. This is still considered, if you look at my size of my font, this is 24. This is still considered 24, but it's a superscript. Let's make a subscript. Subscript, same thing. Positions text below the original baseline. And it still assumes it's the same point size, and I just need to check that to turn that off. Other things we see here, underline. Be careful with underline. Underline, if I were to do this author's name here, guess what happens when you underline? It strikes through a lot of these descenders on letter forms. So be careful. What's better in the design world are rules, and rules are basically just a horizontal, vertical, or diagonal line, and that is a much better choice. A couple other things that we may see over here. We do have an all caps. We have a small caps. All caps would make, let's choose this name here. And if I do all caps, makes them all capitals. Okay. And if I do small caps, it makes the larger, a capital, but then the rest are capitals, but at a smaller size. Notice though, still, this whole thing is still at 12 points, so it's still remembering that, that it's at that specific point size. One more thing, ligatures is turned on at the moment. So ligatures does a substitution in some fonts. And I don't know that my font of Times New Roman will do this, but the F and the I, look at what happened there. They joined. That's a typical ligature. The F and the L is another one that's in some fonts will form kind of their own single letter form from those two individuals. So it's good to have ligatures on. All right, so that's the character panel.